Kaiser, hey, thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Of course, happy to.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and your role here at SAP.
So I'm on the solution management team in data and analytics. So I work really closely with creating new strategic partnerships. I work with the go-to-market team, the product team, the engineering teams on driving adoption of our data and analytics solutions.
So one of those aspects is BTP.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your perspective on what BTP is, but where it really fits in, like where that rubber hits the road for the enterprise.
I think really the BTP is the accelerator for customers to converge all their business processes, the automations that they do, their data and analytics solutions into a single platform that they can extend across the enterprise. Maybe that's extending across the data landscape. Maybe that's extending across my process automations, the applications that I'm building. It's that accelerator that brings all these multiple work streams across my enterprise into a synergistic place.
It seems like kind of the one-stop shop for all things SAP coming together.
Yeah, and we definitely want it to be for customers, right? And for me, I work on data and analytics, so I want customers to view BTP as, well, this is a great way for me to integrate with my business processes, with my business, and make that critical business data, that rich business data, available to all my data and analytics use cases.
But let's be realistic about this. Not all enterprise data sits within SAP.
Right,
so
totally.
How do you start to bring that into the fold? Because the reality is I'm going down the path, regardless of what department I might be coming from or what problem I might be solving, I'm going to have some SAP components if I'm an SAP customer today, but I'm also going to have some non-SAP components, and I've got to figure out how that comes together.
Yes, totally. And as I've been talking with customers, I'm new to SAP. I've been here for just 1 year. 1 year anniversary today. So
congratulations.
You made it.
Yeah. We made it.
Well, you got to make it through this interview first.
Now I got to get through this as well, and then I've made it for a full year.
Yes, you got
to get to the end of today. But as the customers I talk with, of course SAP data comes up. It's my valuable, it's the lifeblood of my transactions. But what about my non-SAP data that has other signals for marketing or for my customer behavior, whatever it may be? How can I bring these together in a way that isn't just extracting data, then rebuilding the data, and then integrating that data in a never-ending cycle? And what we want to do is to really increase the collaboration across the industry-leading data vendors. So what we'll be announcing at SAP Data Unleashed is we'll have new partnerships with our industry-leading open data vendors of how I can easily mold my non-SAP data, my SAP data into a simplified way. And the item that we're really coming around together from an architecture standpoint, how to manage my data, is what we call a business data fabric.
Now, one of the things, just ask this question, Tony, I know you're chomping at the bit.
It's okay.
The technology is one thing.
Yes.
But there are other aspects that you have to think about when you're talking about data integration and bringing this data together. What are some of those conversations, whether it's context or culture, as we've talked about in past conversations, that a customer really needs to kind of step back and think about before they just dive straight in with the technology?
Yes. I'd say one of them that you just hit on, Tim, is context. And what do we mean about context? If I dive directly into the technology and only focus on technology, it's really easy to get blindsided of, well, what's my data actually mean? What's the value that it has? What's the signals that are inherent within it? And not just what signals it has, but what are signals that it's connected with other data pieces around my business? And am I continually preserving the clarity that that context gives me across all my use cases that are helping me run on data? If I'm not, then am I really just serving my technology? Am I just doing what my technology tells me to do? Rather than looking at my business and saying, what are these signals that my data is telling me that I should do? And is that my first and foremost priority? So I'd say what comes up a lot with customers, a lot with our partners as well, is how do I preserve that business context, that meaning that gives strong meaning to data, and then permeate it throughout my entire data landscape. And it's really easy to forget about that, right? A lot of us data users, we love rows and columns. Give me my rows, give me my columns, and let me do what I want with that data as quickly as possible. But when we dilute intelligent data from my business processes down to just rows and columns, it takes out a lot of that intelligence and that contextual data and metadata that gives me the signals to know what I should do with this data, and also makes it available for my business users to actually understand. So to answer your question, I'd say context is really critical.
And that's really the key magical ingredient. We were talking about that with some of your newly announced partners before this, Data Robot and Collibra.
Yes.
So I want to ask this question, and actually this builds on what you were just asking, because I was anticipating exactly what you were going to ask, which is that, one, how does the customer have to approach this differently? In other words, like they've traditionally worked in these, in these silos. They're bound by discipline, maybe by data set, maybe by tool type. And how does SAP have to work differently? Because the fact is, SAP has traditionally been its own little refuge of data. So take it from both sides there.
Yes, I'd say both of us need to be, from a customer from SAP, be business outcome focused. What's the purpose of this data project that I'm doing? Am I just focusing on bringing data from these sources and making it available for these few users that have asked for it? What are you trying to do? Are you doing supply chain disruption predictions? Are you trying to understand what business partners you should choose from? Trying to score your business partners? Trying to understand your marketing funnel better? Think about, really nail down.
Go back to why are we here?
What are we doing this for?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Don't just be data driven, be insights driven.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to be data driven. Let's bring data over here.
That's a really important point, because we've been hearing this, and I come from the data world, and so I've been hearing for the last decade, the decade of big data, of being a data driven organization. And we're saying it's more than that. But on the other hand, again, this goes back to kind of like the Venus and Mars, sort of a syndrome we were talking about earlier today, which is that you have the app side, where basically people just think of their whole world is bounded by the data that's within the walled garden of their app. So how do both sides have to think about this differently?
Right, because I think we have to think about it differently. Think about all the users that are going to touch this use case.
Yeah.
Don't just think about the technical folks or the somewhat technical business analyst or business data analyst folks, but how is this going to help my folks that are completely on the business side, that are making decisions about my supply chain, my marketing funnel, whatever it may be, and work from there of what kind of technology integration do I need to drive. So we need to do that from the SAP side. We need to do that with Collibra, Databricks, Data Robot, Confluent as well, and not just think you have a schema registry that we need to integrate with. How can we make that happen? More of, okay, we have customers that need customer 360 views of everything that's going around, understanding customer behavior. A lot of that customer behavior are transactions that happen in SAP systems. There's also, as Tim said, a lot of non-SAP data that's happening for a customer 360 use case as well. So work from there to drive what we need to deliver to our customers, and not just, let's add a few more integrated bits between our two technology companies, because we can't just be servants to our technology. We've got to deliver data that's meaningful to the business.
You said something earlier that really resonated with me, and it kind of gets to the point of the technology is somewhat irrelevant, right? If you want to be provocative, the technology is irrelevant. The data is relevant. What we're really trying to do is solve business problems.
Yes.
Right? We're trying to solve problems that impact customers. Because without the customers, why are we here? Right? And then that, if you double click on it, kind of delves you into, okay, what data elements do you need to be leveraging to get the insights to make those business decisions? And then eventually you get to the applications that are the ways that data gets presented or consumed, and the analytics that go with it. And then you also talk about the integration components that come along with it. And so I think the one piece that I'd kind of come back to is, do you think that there is work to be done by customers, existing customers, but also net new customers that maybe haven't fallen into the SAP ecosystem yet, that need to do some work around that, need to be kind of maybe changing their lens, changing their focus.
Yes, I think we've talked a lot in the past few years about data culture, right? How do I build this type of data culture? If data fluency, data literacy, we throw out a lot of these terms,
But that's data-centric.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. That it's data-centric, focused on the data. So you're asking more, what do they need to change from like culture-wise?
Correct. Because if it becomes the context for the data,
Yeah.
right? It helps drive decisions you make around where should I be focusing my attention with regards to data? Should I be focusing over here in the corner? Should I be over here?
Should I
Maybe
be
a little
collecting
bit
this data in the first place?
Right. I'd say to that comes back to what I was saying to Tony is what business outcome am I trying to drive? And having a plan as a business strategically, or what are the few outcomes that I need to drive this year? Across, do I need to drive more revenue stream? Do I need to innovate more quickly and create new products? Do I need to improve customer experiences? Do I need to simplify my supply chain? What are things I need to do that's going to unleash my own business and not just focusing on let's bring data together for X, Y, or Z use case because we feel like we need to have it now because someone brought it up in this email or someone flagged this.
I do worry a little bit about that we go through the motions for the sake of going through the motions, as opposed to focusing on what's really important.
Right. So I'll just sort of ask my penultimate question here, which is that, so how is SAP's partnership strategy, basically, how are you hoping that will change this?
Yes.
That will move the needle?
Yes. I hope more than anything is that it allows us to jointly serve customers unlike we ever have before, in the way that it decreases the complexity they have to go through to make their data and their systems talk to one another. And we're calling that the hidden data tax. And I think that's something that really has resonated with customers, is there is this hidden data tax on me every time I choose another technology and another technology for this use case.
Because you're losing stuff in translation. It's like a JPEG photo where you make a copy of a JPEG. And
exactly.
It's lossy.
Just makes it more and more and more difficult the more it goes down.
Right.
And so I feel with these new strategic partnerships that the synergy, the collaboration that we're coming together, I hope in the years to come, we take 100 steps of something I needed to do as a business down to 5 steps on a business outcome driven project that I need to make.
That means a lot of joint solutions development.
A lot of joint solution development, a lot of listening to our customers together, not in silos and telling each other what each customer said, but listening to the customer together and figuring out what do we need to do now to make it simplified for the customer. Not just what's best for your roadmap or my roadmap.
Sure.
I know there needs to be priorities, right? We don't live in a perfect world, but it's really listening to the customers together and then developing on their behalf and just being customer obsessed. I think us all coming together, the massive amount of customers that we already have between these partners and SAP is ginormous. So if we could just move the needle by a few % on the integration that we are building together, we'll simplify lots of processes, lots of headaches that businesses are having today.
Right. Do you think that simplification or the lack thereof is becoming a hindrance for companies?
I think so, because I constantly hear we've adopted this new data and analytics solution, or we heard this really good thing about this other new third-party tool that we should use. But then when we interview customers again, and I ask them, would you say that you're in an insights-driven business? The amount of customers that raise their hand out of 100 would probably be 10. Maybe less in my experience.
Because they're so bogged down in the implementation
and
detail.
Can they raise their hand and say, yes, here's the 3 things that it's done for us in the past 12 months. We delivered new customer experiences that drove a 15% increase in revenue stream. We simplified our supply chain mechanisms, and we have better predictions now on what we can provide to our customers. We've increased customer review and satisfaction rate. Can you say that within the last 12 to 18 months that data has done that for you? I think more it's It's constantly working on what's the next thing we need to integrate now with. What's the other data that I need to extract and put into a central location because my IT needs it for X use case. But really, it's so easy to get lost in this technology and not think of, I have all of these amazing signals from my data. Let's do a few really impactful things with them to drive my business. So 100%, I think the lack of simplification is leading customers to get lost into this integration tour that they're constantly on.
There seems to be somewhat of a chronic problem around a lack of simplification. I mean, put a different way, the complexity is getting exponentially more complicated. And it seems like data is one area that would benefit from some degree of simplification.
It's just like what we call the modern data stack. The modern data stack has gotten so complicated. We've got to rethink it.
Yeah.
So kind of maybe to end on a high note, what would be one takeaway in your recent conversations over the course of the last year that you've been at SAP? And we'll just say that you've been here a year, even though you've got some more time today.
Well, as soon as you're done with the interview, you can say.
But as soon as I get home.
But I mean, what's one of those takeaways that kind of stands out that you wish more were thinking about, whether that's folks at SAP, whether that's partners, whether it's the ecosystem, whether it's customers? Like, what's one of those takeaways that you've observed that you wish more people saw or knew about?
I would say the main takeaway is, do I understand the depth that the context of my data, and particularly my business data, do I understand the depth that it provides me? A lot of us don't, because it is so complex.
Can you give an example of what you mean by that?
What I mean, I'd say, for example, a sales order that I have in an SAP system.
Sure.
I may think that one sales order or one transaction means, all right, that transaction done, that's just one signal to a business. But really, that one sales order that I do within this multitude of sales order that I keep in my SAP application inputs into hundreds of fields, dozens of tables, impacts the metadata around it in thousands of ways. And the way that that data and metadata and those signals interact with one another help me really understand an entire customer's journey, what they need, what their behaviors are. And that's easy to get lost when I just think that data's rows and columns.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about more than just simply taking inventory out to fulfill that sales order. You're talking about, well, this sales order was purchased by this person with this background on this date when these other external elements were taking place. You know, people were going after umbrellas and it happened to be raining that day. Okay, well, there's some correlations in the data.
Totally.
Is that what you're...
Totally, and this is the distribution partner that delivered it.
Yeah.
And here's how quickly it was delivered, and here's how many were delivered late, here's how many came on time, here's the satisfaction of those customers. All of those signals are interrelated with one another, and when we quickly think that data is just rows and columns that serves me in my use case, we forget about all the soul that a data has.
The context.
That context, right? That's what really makes data a story. And what we need to do is have data stories and not just data rows and columns.
And you bring that story together from multiple sources, and that's the rocket science we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's what customers, in my conversation, that's what they want. Right? More collaboration.
Right.
That's great. We'll have to leave it right there. Kaiser, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Of course.
Great, happy anniversary.
Yes.
Yes.
I made it 1 year.